My name is Rachel Evans. I'm 60 years old, and just a few months ago, I celebrated what was supposed to be one of the most special days of my life, my retirement party. After 35 years as a high school English teacher, I was finally ready to slow down, travel a little, maybe start a book club, and spend more time with my husband, Tom. Or so I thought. That evening, everything felt magical at first. My co-workers had gone above and beyond. There were flowers, decorations in my favorite shades of blue, and even a little cake with a tiny chalkboard and apple made out of icing. The school gym was transformed into a little celebration hall, with my favorite songs playing softly in the background and so many familiar faces smiling at me. I felt truly appreciated, truly seen. Tom stood by my side most of the night, smiling for photos, shaking hands, giving polite compliments. He looked handsome in that navy blue blazer I'd bought for him last Christmas, the one he rarely wore. I remember feeling this deep warmth in my chest, thinking, this is what we worked for, this moment, this peace. I felt proud and grateful and a little overwhelmed by the attention. I gave a short speech, a little emotional, thanking my students, my colleagues, and of course, Tom, who I said had been my rock through all these years. Everyone clapped, some even teared up, and I sat down next to him with my heart full. That's when everything unraveled. As the final round of applause faded, and people started returning to their food and drinks, Tom leaned toward me and said, in the calmest, coldest voice I've ever heard, I need you to look at this. I turned, smiling, expecting maybe a small gift or a note. Instead, he placed an envelope in my lap. I stared at it, confused. I thought maybe it was something from one of our daughters, or maybe tickets for a surprise trip, something romantic. It had my name neatly printed on the front. I opened it, and my heart dropped. Divorce papers. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. The noise around me faded. I just kept staring at the first page, rereading my name and his and the word petitioner. I looked up at him, thinking this had to be some kind of sick joke. But he just stared back at me with this blank expression like he'd just handed me a receipt for groceries. Why, now? I whispered. He didn't even blink. I didn't want to wait. Those 5 words, I didn't want to wait, echoed in my head for days after. Like I was an inconvenience. Like our entire marriage was just something to step over once it no longer served him. I excused myself, trying to keep it together. I locked myself in the staff restroom and just stood there, staring at my own reflection in the mirror. My lipstick was perfect. My earrings sparkled. I looked happy. And yet, inside, I was cracking. The worst part? I had to walk back out there. I couldn't cause a scene. People were laughing, toasting, dancing. I couldn't ruin the night for everyone else. So I swallowed it. I pasted on a smile. I told Tom I'd talk to him later, and he nodded like we were business partners scheduling a meeting, not a husband and wife falling apart. The next morning, I woke up alone. Tom had left a note saying he was going to stay at a hotel for a while. There was no explanation. No emotion. Just instructions on where to sign and what to do next. I sat on the edge of our bed for a long time, holding that envelope like it was radioactive. At first, I blamed myself. Was I too focused on work all these years? Had I missed the signs? Had I failed to be the wife he wanted? But then I remembered all the things I did. All the ways I showed up. The birthdays I planned. The sacrifices I made. The way I kept things running while he changed jobs, switched hobbies. Even when he got sick that one year, I was always there. And suddenly, I wasn't angry at myself anymore. I was angry at him. Angry for picking that moment, my moment, to drop a bomb like that. Angry for the cowardice. Angry for making me feel disposable. The days that followed were a blur of silence, sadness, and confusion. I didn't tell anyone right away. I couldn't. Every time I opened my mouth to say the words, they caught in my throat. Divorce after 32 years? Who was I without him? What was my life supposed to look like now? But the weird thing is, once the shock wore off, I started noticing things. Little things that didn't add up. Things I had ignored or excused before because I trusted him. Like how he was always stepping out to take a call during dinner for the last few months. Or how he started going to the gym out of nowhere after years of avoiding it. Or the new cologne. The late night emails. The way he started locking his phone screen even when we were just watching TV on the couch. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me knew. I knew there was someone else. Still, I needed proof. And that's when I remembered something. About 6 months ago, I had accidentally signed up for a call tracking feature through our phone provider when I was trying to set up voicemail on my new phone. I never disabled it because I completely forgot it existed. It quietly logged every incoming and outgoing call to both of our phones, storing them in a little folder I hadn't checked in ages. And one night, with shaking hands, I opened that folder. What I saw made my stomach twist. There were 43 calls to the same number over the past 2 months. Some during the day. Many late at night. Some lasting 5 or 10 minutes. Others over an hour. I stared at that number, my chest tightening. It wasn't a business number. It wasn't a family member. It was someone I didn't recognize. I wrote the number down and called it from a different phone. A woman answered. Her voice was soft, a little hesitant. I said nothing. Just listened to her say hello. Who is this? I hung up. It was her. I knew it. I didn't need her name. I didn't need the full story. I had all I needed. Tom had left me not because he needed space or because we had grown apart. He had replaced me. And while I was working on lesson plans and organizing retirement events, he was building a new life behind my back. But here's the thing. He thought serving me those papers at my retirement party would break me. That I'd quietly disappear, sign the dotted lines, and leave him free to ride off into his new chapter. What he didn't know was that I still had fight left in me. That I was tired of being the quiet, accommodating one. That I was about to make the biggest comeback of my life. And it all started with those 43 calls. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept replaying those calls in my head, 43 of them. 43 times he chose her over me. 43 moments he could have been honest. And instead, he was slipping further away behind my back while smiling to my face like nothing was wrong. The next morning, I got up early. Made coffee the way I always did, out of habit more than desire, and sat at the kitchen table in silence. The same table where we'd eaten dinner together, where we'd talked about bills and birthdays and future vacations. Now it just felt like a reminder of how many lies had been passed across it. I didn't cry. I think I was too numb for that. But I did feel something, focused. Like my grief had turned a corner. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. I knew I had to do something. Not for revenge. Not to make him hurt the way I was hurting. But because I deserved answers. I deserved truth. I had given over 3 decades of my life to this man. The least he owed me was honesty. I started making a plan. First, I pulled up our shared phone bill and downloaded the logs. I highlighted every call to that number. Then I checked our joint bank statements. I wasn't looking for proof of an affair, I already knew. I just needed to understand how deep it went. How long it had been happening. How many times I'd been left at home while he was out, spending our money on her. Sure enough, there were dinner charges from places we'd never gone together. Hotel bookings in cities we hadn't visited. A spa gift card purchase in her area. I knew it was hers because I'd Googled the number, and it matched a boutique wellness center 2 towns over. It was like following a breadcrumb trail of betrayal. Every detail stung, but it also made things clearer. And the clearer things got, the more certain I became I wasn't going to let him walk away from this with a clean slate. So I called my lawyer. Her name's Meredith. She's sharp, no nonsense, and incredibly kind in the way only a woman who's seen too many messy marriages can be. I told her everything. The retirement party. The envelope. The calls. The hotel receipts. She listened quietly, then said, "Rachel, this changes everything. Because here's the thing, he served me those papers thinking it would be simple. But once Meredith saw what I had, she told me we were going to file a countersuit. He wasn't just walking away. He was going to have to answer for every single lie, every breach of trust, every cent of marital assets spent on his little side life." I gathered everything, screenshots, printed records, notes, and handed them to her. It felt good. It felt right. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't protecting his image or worrying about how it would look to others. I was finally standing up for me. And then came the phone call that almost broke me. It was from our oldest daughter, Anna. She'd just gotten back from studying abroad and had missed the retirement party. She was calling to catch up, but the moment I heard her voice, my throat tightened. I hadn't told her yet. "Mom, how was the party?" she asked, cheerful as ever. I hesitated. "It was nice." She paused. "That doesn't sound like you. Everything okay?" And just like that, the words spilled out. I didn't mean to tell her over the phone, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her about the envelope, the silence, the hotel, the other woman. She didn't speak for a long time. Then I heard her sniffle. "He did that to you? At your retirement party? I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I didn't want you to find out like this." No, I'm glad you told me. I just can't believe him." Neither could I. But hearing her voice, knowing she was just as shocked and hurt, it reminded me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was cruel. Unforgivable, even. That night, both of my daughters came over. We sat in the living room, eating ice cream straight from the tub like we used to during their high school breakups. We talked. We cried. We laughed a little, too. They told me how proud they were of me, how strong I was being. I didn't feel strong, but I held on to their words like lifelines. And then, something unexpected happened. About a week later, Tom called. Not to apologize. Not to explain. He called to ask if I'd had a chance to sign the papers yet. Can you imagine? After all that, that's what he wanted to know. No, how are you doing? No acknowledgement of the pain he caused. Just a checklist item. I told him flatly, "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." There was a pause. Then he scoffed. "Rachel, let's not make this messier than it needs to be." That's when I snapped. Messy? You handed me divorce papers at my retirement party, Tom. While everyone was clapping and toasting me, you were slipping an envelope into my lap like I was an inconvenience. Don't you dare talk to me about messy. He tried to cut in, but I didn't let him. For once, I didn't let him control the conversation. You think I'm just going to roll over and make this easy for you? After everything you've done? After 43 calls to another woman while you sat across from me at dinner and pretended everything was fine? Silence. He didn't think I knew. Didn't think I'd find out. Yeah, I said, I know. And so does my lawyer. So if I were you, I'd stop worrying about my signature and start worrying about what's coming next. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt powerful. Alive. The Rachel who used to tiptoe around confrontation, who used to swallow her feelings to keep the peace, that Rachel was gone. And in her place was a woman who knew her worth. Who knew what she'd survived. Who wasn't going to be made into a footnote in her own life story. He underestimated me. But that was his mistake. I didn't hear from Tom for a while after that phone call. I think he finally realized I wasn't going to be the woman who quietly signed away 32 years of marriage just to make things easier for him. And honestly, the silence was a relief. Instead, I focused on me. For the first time in what felt like forever. I started each morning with a walk. Just a simple half-hour around the neighborhood, but it helped clear my head. I listened to music, sometimes old songs from our wedding playlist, just to remind myself that I could take those memories back. They didn't belong to him. They were mine too. And I refused to let him taint every good thing we'd built. One morning, while walking past the local bookstore, I noticed a flyer on the window for a creative writing workshop. I almost walked past it, but something in me paused. I used to love writing. Before life became about grocery lists, student reports, and parent-teacher meetings, I used to write little short stories for myself. Nothing fancy, just bits and pieces of my thoughts in journal form. So I signed up. It was a small group, mostly women around my age, a few younger people. And sitting there, in that circle, hearing people read their stories out loud, something inside me started to shift. I wasn't just healing, I was rediscovering. Meanwhile, Meredith, my lawyer, was working her magic. She called me one afternoon and said, "Rachel, you're not going to believe this." She'd pulled Tom's financial records, his personal accounts, the ones he thought were private. And guess what? There were not only regular transfers to a woman named Janelle, yes, the other woman had a name, but also payments for things like rent on an apartment in her name, vacation packages, and even a monthly car payment. He was essentially living a double life. Meredith said, "This is grounds for misconduct, Rachel. We're going after him for asset misuse. And based on how long this has been going on, you're entitled to a significant portion of those funds, even if they were spent on someone else." That word, entitled, stuck with me. For so long, I'd been told to be understanding, patient, flexible. But now, for once, I was hearing that I deserved something. That I had rights. That he was the one in the wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there and let it sink in. He thought I was clueless. Thought I'd never noticed the distance, the late-night texts, the secret spending. But I did. And now, I had the proof. Still, even with all that, the part that hurt most wasn't the cheating. It was the way he discarded me. He didn't even try to fix it. Didn't suggest counseling. Didn't say he was sorry. He just wanted out. Like I was a phase he'd outgrown. One evening, I went through our old photo albums. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I needed to remind myself that it wasn't all bad. That once upon a time, we were in love. That I wasn't crazy for staying as long as I did. There were pictures of us on camping trips, laughing with our girls in the backyard, birthday parties where he'd surprised me with flowers. And I realized something, those memories were real. Even if he changed, even if he became someone I couldn't recognize anymore, those moments had still mattered. But they didn't define my future. I did. A week later, I got an invitation in the mail. It was from the school where I'd taught for 35 years. They were hosting a small post-retirement luncheon for former staff, and they wanted me to come. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to face all those familiar faces again. What if they asked about Tom? What if I broke down in front of them? But then I remembered something Anna said to me, "Mom, you don't have to be ashamed of what he did. That's his shame to carry." So I went. I wore a soft blue dress, the same one I'd worn to our 25th wedding anniversary party. Not because of the memory it held, but because I felt beautiful in it. I walked into that room with my head high, and to my surprise, people cheered. They clapped and hugged me and told me how much they missed me already. One of my old coworkers, Marcia, leaned in and whispered, "You look happier than I've seen you in years." And she was right. Because for the first time, I felt like I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't smiling through the cracks. I was genuinely okay. Still healing, yes. But okay. The luncheon ended with a small toast. And to my complete shock, they asked me to say a few words. I stood up. My hands trembled just a little. I hadn't planned anything, but the words came easily. I just want to say thank you. Not just for today, but for every moment over the past 35 years. This place gave me more than a job. It gave me a purpose, a second home, and friends I'll always cherish. Life hasn't exactly gone the way I imagined it would, but I'm learning that sometimes the biggest heartbreaks can lead us to the most unexpected freedom. So here's to new chapters, even if they don't start the way we thought they would. The room clapped again. Some people teared up. And I felt proud. Not because I'd said something inspiring, but because I'd survived something painful and stood tall in front of people who had no idea what I'd been through. That night, I went home alone. But not lonely. I lit a candle, poured myself a glass of wine, and opened a new notebook. And I wrote. Day 1. Not of starting over, but of continuing with clarity, with strength, and with peace. A few days later, Meredith called again. This time, she was nearly giddy. "Rachel, we just got a response from his attorney. And guess what? He's willing to settle." I raised an eyebrow. Settle how? She explained that once they'd seen the call logs, the financial statements, and the timeline of his double life, his legal team basically crumbled. They knew if this went to court, he'd come out looking like a complete disaster. Not only would I walk away with more, but his reputation, and hers, would take a major hit. He's agreed to full asset division, compensation for the funds spent during the affair, and a buyout on the house so you can keep it. I sat there in silence. He had tried to take everything away from me, and now, he was the one left scrambling. "Do you want to accept it?" Meredith asked. And after a long breath, I said, "Yes." But not because I'm giving up. Because I'm ready to move on. Because the truth is, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted mornings where I didn't have to second-guess my worth. Nights where I could fall asleep without wondering if someone was lying to me. Days filled with laughter, books, friends, and maybe, someday, someone who saw me for who I really am, not someone who used me until they didn't need me anymore. I may not have chosen this path, but I was going to walk it with my head held high. I wish I could say that once I signed that settlement agreement, everything suddenly got easier. Like life just wrapped me in a warm blanket of peace and said, "There you go, Rachel, you've made it." But healing doesn't work like that. It came in waves. Some days I woke up feeling powerful, unstoppable even. Other days, I found myself reaching for my phone to text Tom something funny, forgetting, just for a second, that he wasn't my person anymore. Then the weight of everything would hit me all over again. But those moments started to get fewer. I filled my days with the things I'd always said I'd do someday. I signed up for that painting class at the community center. I started baking again, real baking, not just box mix brownies when the girls came home from college. I even fostered a dog, an old golden retriever named Max who had the same sad, wise eyes I saw in the mirror most mornings. We made a good pair. And the writing class? That became the anchor I didn't know I needed. I wrote everything. Fiction. Memoirs. Even silly poems about burned toast or the joy of wearing pajamas at noon. But one night, I sat down and wrote about him. About the party. The envelope. The 43 phone calls. I didn't name names. But it all came out, the betrayal, the silence, the way he looked at me like I was a burden when I'd spent my life lifting him up. I cried while writing it. Ugly, snotty, shaking kind of crying. But when I was done, I felt empty in the best way. Like I had finally set it all down. The next week, I read that piece aloud during class. My hands trembled the entire time, but I got through it. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Then someone whispered, "Wow." Another woman, Margot, who had the kindest eyes, walked up after and hugged me. She said, "You just gave so many of us permission to feel what we've been too scared to say." And in that moment, I realized something. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who'd ever been blindsided, who'd ever been told to smile through heartbreak, who'd ever picked herself up when no one was clapping. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found an old wooden box labeled Tom's Stuff. I almost tossed it without looking inside, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were old photos, letters, trinkets from vacations we'd taken, and one small velvet pouch. I opened it and found the watch I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. I had it engraved with, "For every second we've shared, and every one to come." I held it for a long time. Back then, I believed that love was forever. That if you worked hard enough, gave enough, were enough, it would last. But sometimes, love ends. Not always in screaming matches or dramatic exits. Sometimes it dies quietly, buried under routine, neglect, or selfishness. And that's what hurt the most. Not that he cheated, but that he stopped choosing me. I put the watch back in the pouch and donated the whole box the next day. Because I didn't need reminders of the man he'd become. I wanted to make space for who I was becoming. A few weeks later, my daughter Sarah came over. She brought wine and Thai food, like we used to do during her college breaks. We sat on the couch with Max curled up at our feet, and she asked, "Do you ever think about dating again?" I laughed. "Are you serious? I just got out of a 32-year marriage." "I know," she said, nudging me. "But I also know you. And you deserve someone who sees you. All of you." I smiled but shook my head. "Right now, I'm just figuring out how to be me without him. That's enough." But her question lingered. Later that night, I sat in bed and thought about it. Not dating, really. Just love. Companionship. The idea that maybe, someday, I might sit across from someone who didn't know all my scars, but who saw them and stayed anyway. I wasn't ready. But for the first time, I didn't immediately reject the thought. The very next morning, something strange happened. I received a message on Facebook from an old friend, Jack Monroe. He was the art teacher at my school for years, retired 2 years before me, and had always been a kind face in the hallway. We hadn't talked much beyond school events, but he'd left a comment on one of my posts about the writing workshop. His message simply said, "That story you shared, it hit me hard. You're stronger than you know, Rachel." That was it. Nothing flirty. Nothing intrusive. Just kind. I stared at that message for longer than I care to admit. And then, heart pounding like I was a teenager again, I typed back, "Thank you, Jack. That means more than you know." We started chatting. At first, just about the class. Then about retirement. He told me he'd taken up pottery and spent his afternoons trying to make mugs that didn't look like melted vases. I told him about Max and the time he barked at his own reflection for 10 straight minutes. Our conversations were light, easy. No pressure. Just two people who'd both weathered storms and were learning how to laugh again. A few days later, he asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. And that's when the panic set in. Not because I didn't want to, but because I hadn't dated in over 30 years. What if I was awkward? What if I said the wrong thing? What if he looked at me and only saw someone who had been left? I called Anna. She answered on the first ring. "Mom? Do I even remember how to flirt?" I blurted out. There was a pause. Then she burst out laughing. "Oh my God, are you going on a date?" "It's just coffee," I said, feeling heat rise to my face even though no one could see me. "Mom," she said gently, "if he makes you smile, go. You don't owe anyone an explanation, not even us. This is your life now." So I said yes. We met at this little cafe near the park. I wore a dress that I hadn't worn since before the separation, a deep green one that always made my eyes stand out. He brought me a small bouquet of daisies. Said he remembered they were my favorite from a conversation we had years ago in the teacher's lounge. And just like that, I felt seen. We talked for 2 hours. Not about the divorce. Not about betrayal. We talked about music, about travel, about books we both loved but never finished. I laughed until my cheeks hurt. And for a while, I forgot the heaviness that had followed me for so long. When we stood to leave, he didn't ask for anything. No pressure. No expectations. He just said, "This was nice. You're still the warmest person I know." And I walked away with a smile I hadn't worn in years. Because whether or not that coffee led to anything else didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd allowed myself to be open again. To possibility. To joy. To new chapters. Even if I still didn't have all the answers, I knew one thing for sure. Tom giving me those divorce papers didn't ruin my life. It freed it. The thing about healing is, sometimes you don't notice how far you've come until you look back and realize you're not standing in the same place you once were. That's how I felt one morning when I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Tom in days. Not in anger. Not in sadness. Not at all. It was like a fog had finally lifted, and I could see my life clearly for the first time. And in that clarity, I saw how much space I had, physically and emotionally. The house felt different now. Not empty, but open. Like it was finally mine. I painted the kitchen a soft yellow and bought fresh herbs to grow on the windowsill. I turned our old guest room into my writing nook. Max would curl up at my feet while I typed away, snoring louder than should be legal, and I'd find myself smiling for no reason at all. Jack and I kept seeing each other. At first, it was just coffee every couple of weeks. Then it turned into walks at the park, dinners where we both insisted on splitting the check, and phone calls that stretched long into the night.